Welcome back to the panel discussion, a primer on identity and access management in government, sponsored by Okta on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today, Togai Andrews, the Chief Information Security Officer at FEMA, Brian Mulo, the Director of Infrastructure Modernization at GSA, Judy Snowich, the Identity, Credential, and Access Management Program Manager at the Interior Department, and Ted Gerard, the Vice President of Public Sector for Okta. Now, before break, we were talking a little bit about the role of identity and access management into the cloud, into IT modernization, always the hot topic around conferences. Brian, you were going to jump in before break a little bit. When GSA has that conversation about IT modernization cloud, do you raise your hand and be like, okay, guys, but we need to talk about this issue too, or is that issue kind of intertwined already?
Right. It's definitely an agenda item that's brought up. And to add what Togai was mentioning, the conversation really starts with the application team that's doing the development, right? A lot of applications organically grew up in the environment in the past, and they have different stances on how they handle identity management. And obviously, it's a great opportunity during modernization to take advantage of that and ensure that we're aligning to current policies, procedures, and governance that we have in place. So a couple of areas that we look to target are, identification and minimization of point solutions, right? So as SaaS solutions are available, there's a number of different items and offerings that are very dedicated to those solutions. We try to minimize the number of identities, obviously, that a user has. A number of credentials tied to their identity, which was a common point that was brought up previously. And then really standardizing the roles or categories of roles, so we can ensure that we're enabling those across the enterprise in some standardized fashion.
The other challenge around this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, is somebody may say, well, this is just an application where the user does X, Y, or Z. It doesn't really need identity management, or it can just username and password is fine. It's your job or your CISO's job or your CIO's job to jump in and say, okay, but remember, they're adding their address or they're adding their telephone number. That's considered potentially PII. So we do need a higher level of identity management. Is that sometimes the aha moment for maybe some application owners? Have you seen that?
For sure. Yeah, and I think you not to gloss over the point you mentioned, I think, ICAM and identity management is really intertwined with cybersecurity at this point, and that's the way we treat it. So, there is definitely an aha moment, and it really makes the application owner rethink how they're developing or modernizing their application, right? We may need to take this from the ground up to ensure that we're adhering to these standards and that some of this data is potentially sensitive.
And Ted, this goes back to your idea of the integration. This is why if you do a identity management platform,
right,
it can be integrated more easily. That way you're not the old bolt-on versus build-in, right?
Yeah, well, I want to go back to one of your points. The first question was like, hey, this application says it's like non-critical. Don't worry about it. We don't need to fold it in. If you look at the latest Verizon report, it's like 80% of breaches are weak or stolen password. And the danger of that is the person that gets to use that, they're going to use the same password as the one that they use on everything else because it's easy to remember. And so you steal that one, now all of a sudden you're back into everything else. So you gotta lock that down too. Your question, what was it?
Something about IT modernization cloud.
Yeah.
So the importance of ID management.
Yeah. So we see the world through two lenses, and we kind of heard these problems today. There's the workforce, right? The people that show up to work every day to serve the mission of the agency that they serve. But then there are all the outside entities that you need to do business. Togai, you talked about, hey, first responders and state and local organizations. It's really you're going down a path to try to convince them to get PIV cards. That's a tough road to hoe. Right? You have to be able to extend your system to them in a fashion that is as close to as secure as a PIV. PIV cards are like the ultimate secure thing.
We hope.
Right? And like Judy said, they shouldn't be going anywhere. Right? So they're super secure, but you have to be able to extend a reasonable level of security to outside organizations and to be able to control that. So we see the world through two lenses. One is we call workforce identity, and the other one is called customer identity. And customer identity is really our customers' customers. Having a single platform to enable both of those gives our customers the ability for a 360-degree view of all of their identities, like not only their workforce but all their customers as well. And that we believe is a really important thing.
And really what we're heading down the path toward is this concept of zero trust. And it's come up a little bit. Togai mentioned it. Judy, talk a little bit about the zero trust. It's a great buzzword that we hear all the time, but identity is the key to creating that environment.
It should be the key to creating that environment.
You sound hesitant there, maybe it's not for some people.
I would like to see it embraced as the key to securing that environment. And what we have is a lot of, and this goes back to the conversation a few minutes ago. We have folks that are, they have an application or a device that is not within the network boundary, or they're trying to secure access to the application. But they want to walk away and be able to have a mobile device that allows them access to the same data that's within the network from wherever they are. We have wonderful examples in Interior of people that are out in the field. They're monitoring stream gauges in rivers, and they've got to capture that data. It goes up to a satellite, it comes back down to us in our database. But they also need to make a phone call, or they need to provide other information other than just that data snippet. So, they are out there trying to work with the tools that we have. We have the plethora of many types of devices that, management wants to have. So with that, you're trying to figure out, well, how do we secure these? How do we make them able to access all of their email, all of their network information, briefs that they're going to get that are very secure, and, but they want to do it on the most convenient device that they have. So we go back to identity. We go back to what should they have access to? How are we going to grant that access to now that device so that our data, the path that they're getting to that data is still secure?
And that path has been always a little bumpy because you can say, well, I'm going to let Togai have access. Okay, but how much access? Well, once he's in, he's in. And I think that's the difference we're talking about now is no, you can have access, but you can only have access to a little bit.
Right.
Or you can, again, we go back to what I said earlier, what are the roles and responsibilities. Togai, you mentioned as well, Zero Trust. How's FEMA starting to look at Zero Trust and where's identity fit in, obviously, there too?
Yeah, that's a good question. As our strategy is always to develop a Zero Trust environment, yet and still meet our business needs. And that's a challenge in itself. It's trying to meet your business needs, serve your disaster survivors, and still have a secure network. So identity becomes the catalyst, ICANN becomes the catalyst for creating that Zero Trust environment, yet and still being a business enabler and getting to the yes for our customers. So our customers includes our survivors, but not just the survivors, but also the programs and other entities within FEMA that provides the service to our survivors.
And one of the challenges FEMA has is if I've just survived a hurricane and I come to you and say, hey, I need some benefits, where's your ID? It was lost in the hurricane. Well, who are you? I'm still me. That's another piece of this because not that they need credentials per se, but they may need to fill out a loan application or some kind of benefit application, and that's an identity-based issue as well. So you need connections back to maybe the IRS or the Social Security Administration or some kind of matching. Is that something also that comes up as a big challenge for you guys?
It does, and it's one of the problems that we have and we're trying to solve. Is when a survivor shows up and has no form of identity, how do you identify them as a customer? So we talk about identity, but we talk about from internal to our internal business process, but also as we provide customer service. How do you identify the customer and ensure that that person is who they say they are, right? Especially in terms of granting assistance. So it is a challenge, and we're looking at different ways to try to solve that.
And Brian, GSA has a similar challenge, but usually not with survivors of hurricanes and floods and stuff like that. But you guys do business with so many different vendors, and then you also do customer agencies. What is the conversation around Zero Trust within GSA?
Mm-hmm. Zero Trust is really the definition of maturity, essentially, right? The activities that we're taking are all around enhanced governance, standardization of roles and access, and those are key important factors in ensuring that we're able to put the controls in place that are necessary. I think education of the applications, or application teams, is critically important to ensure that they understand that role. And we're definitely looking to move towards it. It is definitely the right direction, and we're anticipating that the use of some of the CDM tools, as I alluded to earlier, really provide us with some of the data that allows us to to perform that lockdown and understand who is doing what, and also provide the auditability to ensure that what we are putting in place is doing what we intended it to do, or not, for that matter.
And I think that's a great point, that the auditability of it as well. It's one thing to say who you are and, okay, I trust you, but do I trust you tomorrow? Are you still the same person tomorrow? Mm-hmm. There's a whole piece of that. Ted, just weigh in a little bit as well on zero trust. It's a big buzzword from you industry folks.
Yeah.
But there's I think a little more to it than just, hey, it's the next shiny object.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if I can answer it much better than Tagai answered it. It's, it's our thesis that identity is the foundation of a zero trust platform or zero trust architecture. It's, you have to have control of that person, their device, where they are, the entire contextual access management component, what they should have access to. So we don't think you get to zero trust without having a really strong handle on identity and access management.
And when you have those conversations with agency customers, when you explain that to them, or
it's a no-brainer, head nod. They
get it.
Yeah, they get it.
All right. But the question is, how do we get there, right? So then let's bring Judy back into the conversation, because we've been talking a lot about why identity is important. We've been talking about, the fact is that it's the basis for security, but there's a ton of challenges to getting your ICAM, your authentication, your verification into your system. So Judy, lead us off with a little bit of what challenges is Interior seeing?
I think one of the biggest challenges for us was, with HSPD 12 first came out and we established our governance process, we had leadership in all of our bureaus and offices that were responsible for implementing HSPD 12. We had an executive steering committee that was responsible for setting the priorities. And there was a very common goal, a very clear-cut goal. It was issue PIV cards to everyone. And the challenge that we had after all of the cards were out there was, okay, now that happens, and it happens smoothly, and people get new cards when they lose them, and people, so that process seems to be working very well. Maybe we don't need our ICAM Executive Steering Committee anymore, and maybe we don't need all our leadership in the bureaus, because what are we implementing? So I think, the challenge, and the memo helps to meet this challenge, is it reinforces that importance of your ICAM program, the foundation that identity information is. When you couple identity information with other attributes, training, have they got the right training? Are they the right level to have this kind of access? Do they have the right background investigation level to have this kind of access? And then you marry that identity, that vetted identity, with all of those other attributes. Now you've got a really intelligent decision-making capability. Should I give this person access? Is this the person that should get access today?
Ted, weigh in a little bit, because one of the big challenges I think that we talked about today was trying to slap it on, bolt it on. But walk me through some of the other challenges you're seeing as you talk to agencies, because if you say they understand the fact that identity is at the center of security, if you understand the fact that they need to get to a zero trust environment and there's tools like CDM there, and they understand and they understand and they understand,
yeah.
So just do it already, right?
Right.
But it's more difficult than that.
It is way more difficult than that. I think probably the number one difficult thing is just the technical debt that the government has, right? It's not like they're shutting their data centers down anytime soon. Right? There are a couple agencies that have gone 100%, like I think the FCC,
right.
Like they're the only ones I know that are like, hey, we're shutting down our data center, turning off our last server, but we're going cloud. That's not the reality for government, large departmental government agencies. There's going to be this heavy, you talked to me earlier, you got mainframes, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. We have mainframes, so that's not going away anytime soon. So it's that piece. The second one is government agencies have really mature ICAM program offices already. And they have, it's not like, hey, maybe we should be thinking about identity. Like, we've been doing identity for a heck of a long time. So there's a cultural aspect to it, right? And I think the third thing is, and I think the memo addresses it, is acquisition of cloud services. And getting your identity and access management as a service is a new thing. And so there's that pushback as well.
We're almost out of time before I let you guys go. And this has been a great conversation. I want to talk a little bit about where we're heading, because we've talked about the challenges we see today. We've talked about kind of where we're at today. But again, a year from now, 2 years from now, hopefully, we said this probably in 2005, and 2007, and 2009, identity will be different. So Togai, maybe lead us off real quick. Give me about 30 seconds. Where is FEMA going to be in a year, 2 years from now when it comes to identity management and ICAM?
If I have a metric one, well, we really like FEMA to be one as far as ICAM is concerned, is really integrating interoperable credentials across our environment so that we do not have to issue credentials and we can just inherit credentials from other federal agencies. Derived credentials is another part also for our state and local partners. So that's where I would like us to go.
Brian, at GSA?
GSA has a similar want. I mean, as far as the investigating other types of tokens to provide us with that capability, and then also the use of more in development of more shared services, multi-factor shared services like login.gov, OMB Max, things along those lines.
And we're going to skip Ted because Ted will give you the last word. But Judy, where's Interior heading?
So where I'd like to see Interior be in a couple of years is that on day one, when we're onboarding a contractor or a Fed, that they sit down at their office, they have a valid PIV card, they have a computer, they have access to the network, they have access by logging in with their PIV card and typing in their PIN to every single application that they need to have access to. That's my vision.
All right, and will you get there?
I think so.
All right.
I think so too.
Ted, you get the last word of the day, so to speak. What's your hope when we have this conversation again in a year or two, where agency is going to be from Okta's perspective?
Well,
besides,
it's been a really exciting journey. I mean, I joined Okta 3.5 years ago, 0 customers. We're up to 30 customers at this point. What's really exciting is just seeing that the journey that they're on and the kind of help that we can bring with them. The missions that my customers have are really different than any other mission that the rest of my peers have. I've got the best customer in the world. They do awesome things, and being able to help them do their jobs, do them more rapidly, do them more efficiently, do them at a lower cost, and do it more securely is really super rewarding. So I just want to continue doing what we're doing.
All right, well, very good. First, let me thank you all for taking the time, because we are out of time, and this has been a great conversation. So let me thank my guests, Togai Andrews, the Chief Information Security Officer at FEMA, Brian Mulo, the Director of Infrastructure Modernization at GSA, Judy Snowich, the Identity, Credential, and Access Management Program Manager at the Interior Department, and Ted Gerard, the Vice President of Public Sector for Okta. I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion, A Primer on Identity and Access Management in Government, sponsored by Okta on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Okta, OKTA.